Thanks for downloading this episode of the BIMTube podcast. Just a reminder that you can access all the podcasts in video and audio if you visit bim.tube. So our website again is at bim.tube. We hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this edition of the BIMTube podcast. Today, I'm joined by Anita Soni and George Floros both from Skanska. So welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Hello, everyone.
Thank you. And this is the first podcast I've done with two people. So we'll see how the dynamics go. I'm sure it'll work well. And of course, I know you both already. But for the benefit of those watching or listening, could you please introduce yourselves, and also, if you don't mind, just briefly your background about how you got into where you are now, because everyone has a different journey. So Anita, if I could start with you, if that's okay, just what your current role is and how did you get there?
Sure, thanks Stephen. It's always good to reflect on how we got to where we are currently. So hi everyone, Anita Soni. My background from a degrees perspective is geomatic engineering, and then I focused on land surveying and what we now call reality capture. I then did a PhD at UCL with Network Rail on laser scanning and photogrammetry for monitoring of railway infrastructure. And then I moved to Skanska, which was where I've been for the last 7 years. I've been on different projects. I've been in delivery on rail, now moved recently into pre-con and getting a wider scope of BIM and GIS integration with different sectors, so water, highways, energy, etc. Special interest, I would say, as well. You didn't ask, but I'm going to tell you. As-built information, so the handover, and obviously BIM, GIS, and engineering survey integration.
Great, thank you. That was the briefest summary I've ever had, so that's really good and efficient. Oh. Thank you. Well, no, we'll come back. We'll come back to the topics though, so that's really good. Thank you. And George, yourself.
I will try to keep it even more brief, Stephen. Hi, everyone. My name is George Floros. I'm the head of GIS for Skanska UK. My background is in engineering surveying as well. I've done my master's degree on GIS. I'm currently doing my PhD part-time as well at University College London, focusing on the integration of BIM and GIS for asset management. Obviously, I've been my primary interest is focused on data integration and how geospatial can start bringing together all the different disparate data sources that exist in construction. I've been in Skanska for about 2.5 years now. I'm focusing primarily on infrastructure projects, and I'm always up for discussion around ways to improve information management and leverage geospatial in AECOO.
Great, thank you. And so thank you both for that. Just for the benefit of people that haven't seen a podcast before, although it's called BIMTube, BIM in this context, I do mean better information management, just to keep people on their toes. We know it could mean one of several things. I guess we'll probably explore that. But I guess just opening up, to both of you and see who wants to go first, just about what you think are some of the challenges between sort of, I don't normally go so technical, but I will, based on that's what we all do, on sort of integration and data handover. So what I mean is data sharing across different domains within an organization or different organizations. What are and have been some of the biggest challenges, and how are you overcoming them? I know that's a very broad question, but who'd like to go first? Yeah, I'll open that up to either of you who'd like to have a go at that.
I think this is a George question for sure.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Okay.
George,
thank you, Anita.
Yeah.
So we have been looking at this with Anita and the wider BIM and GIS teams in Skanska, Stephen. So I'd say if there were two categories that in terms of challenges, there are obviously the technical challenges, right, around the integration of BIM and GIS and how to do something and how to deliver the right format at the right time. But there are also what we call, the procedural challenges in terms of, do we have clarity on what is required, what is being produced, what is needed, and what is actually being used at an information level. So we can actually go ahead and say, okay, now I know what the what it is we need to produce, and we know how, for example, the asset managers are utilizing this information during the 100 years of maintaining infrastructure projects, we will be in a far better position to address the technical challenges around the BIM GIS interoperability, because technology moves so quickly, right? And constantly new software, new capability, new tools arise. So, but in order to maximize the value, we need to have clarity, good clarity and understanding of what is needed and when is needed. So that would be my first approach on the topic.
Yes, Anita, have you got anything to add to that about what have been the challenges historically? Anything to add?
I think going further downstream, we start talking about the cultural side. I think we can talk about that for days, but it's that cultural aspect as well. So it's not necessarily about, say George and his team and people in my team will be the doing. It's actually making others aware of what's going on, and it not being just for the sake of it, and giving them their purpose and getting them to have a wider understanding of the reasons for it and bringing them on board, which is a phrase that George always uses a lot.
I'd actually like to add on what Anita said, because that's really spot on, Stephen. And we were listening to a podcast you did recently, a few weeks ago, with Mark Enzer, I believe, right? And it's great to see that as a country we have an ambitious digital vision, and how digital, what the role of digital twins can do within the UK, and how it can boost project delivery and so on and so forth. So we need to constantly, one of the main challenges we have is how do we incentivize people that are doing, the boots on the ground to be part of this bigger vision? And how does the digital twin vision is going to help them deliver more safely, efficiently, effectively, and so on with environmental awareness? And if we take as an example, the recently published geospatial framework, which is the National Underground Asset Register, right? This is a fantastic example of how we leverage geospatial digital twins, if you'd like, to improve day-to-day delivery and help everyone get on board, on this journey of digital transformation. So I think it's quite fundamental that the behavioral aspect Anita was explaining is fundamental into the adoption of digital.
Yeah, I think that classic, or at least from an IT side, the people, process, technology, and I know that's cliched for us, but again, that's new for some people, still stands up, doesn't it? Even though there are elements which are about process efficiency, and then obviously technology is self-evident what we mean by that, but it's that people, even how do you describe it, and the communication which we're implying. Have you got anything just to add, just while we're on that theme of the people and the change management, have you got anything to add about where you've seen good examples, whether it's through your own projects or elsewhere, about good communication, specifically the communication? How do we talk to people, and how do we make a story that isn't compelling? You got any examples? So an example of what we're talking about, basically.
Yeah, I can
either of you. It could be external. Just where do you think people have made a good, compelling story for the value of data, for example, or something like that? Where does it make sense to people? Where is the purpose clear?
So it's interesting because whether or not the users in our team, for example, in our delivery team, realized this was their own digital and data transformation, that's another thing. But recently, can't go into too much detail, but from a pre-construction perspective, I've got a nice example of a highways project where we were working on, and it was the client that actually issued quite a significant amount of BIM and GIS data. And by configuring our lovely environment that George and his team have innovated and scaled up, etc., that was that's typically used on delivery. We then thought, how about if we try and do that with the information? Okay, it's, level of detail, level of information is different. Let's get it all in there. And by having that information within that environment, it was instant. So in terms of training, for example, just by showing them GIS and giving them a 15-minute session, that was all that was needed for that 6-month tender, for them to engage with it every day. I think we had 90% of the users, 90% of the project were using it. And it provided all the information that they needed. And what was great is that then they were asking for more. So they said, actually, can you put this information in? Can we incorporate this? And so obviously there was the technical rollout of the solution. There was the training and upskilling. So that's a communication piece as well in how you get your messaging across. I had a conversation this morning about technical people and how communication is so key. You don't want to put people off. You don't want to put the layperson off. You have to come down to a level that they understand without patronizing them. So there was that aspect. I know we don't really talk about it much in our field, but I do feel it's important as the softer skill. But within a few weeks, I think it was, George, we basically established that they were saving 25% of their time rather than scuffling through our CDE looking for information, ensuring it was the latest. By 3 clicks on a web browser, they were accessing the information they needed so that we could focus in on the tender and being competitive rather than which was that drawing, which was the latest. And it also was quite an interesting study in that we got issued new information halfway through the tender. So there was a new design. So that was an excellent use case of then within, I think, 24 hours, we were then re-uploading the information and just saying we can guarantee based on the BIM processes, but in the GeoBIM environment and GIS environment, this is the latest information, this is what's changed. And it was like they could visualize it quite quickly. And I think from a technical team point of view, that was a great use case, but also from the non-expert and the non-GIS and BIM people, they didn't need to know the technical stuff that had gone in the background, but what they knew is that they could trust the data and in the information. And it allowed us to then improve our process with, say, improving our program, improving our commercial drive, which is basically what the tender is all about. You're trying to improve cost, improve program, and have that transparency. So we felt more confident going into that tender and submitting it. So it's a very long-winded example, but I think it just had many different aspects of the improvement. And it was, you only needed to know what you needed to know that had improved, if that makes sense. And yeah, it's been great. And now for all tenders, this is what they're wanting. I believe George and his team have the directors have reached out and said, we need this for all our tenders going forward.
Yeah, it's having that trust, isn't it? Obviously, and I understand it's multifaceted, like the workflow is automated and the rest of it, but it's having that trust, isn't it, of knowing that there will be the latest information because you have already put that process into place. You know, there are data conversion tools out there, but again, things are not seamless unless it's hooked together. Yeah.
So, and then I can give you an extreme example from 6-7 years ago where one thing wasn't up to date in the project-wise environment, if we're going to go into that detail. And so they lost trust, the engineers, they lose trust straight away and they dismiss it being something to go to. So it obviously was important to have, you know, we're really sure this is the latest information, you can trust us. So that was quite nice to see, because I've been on many projects in delivery where if one thing has gone wrong or some integration hasn't worked, you haven't got the latest drawing, they're very quick to dismiss it and give up and then go old school and print it out.
Old school, and it's probably not a bad instinct to have in engineering, right?
Absolutely.
You're talking surveys, yeah. Yeah,
exactly. So I don't know, maybe this is one for you, George, but maybe it's a combination of things that allowed us to be trusted more.
That's a really good point, Anita. And one of the main things, Stephen, I believe, is that we have introduced in Skanska what we call demystifying digital through GeoBIM. Right? But what does this really mean? This means that the GIS function, the BIM function, and the engineering surveying function from a geospatial perspective, we have aligned strategy of how we manage and exchange information with each other. Frankly, from my experience in the industry so far, yes, we know that BIM professionals can work with GIS professionals, but in Skanska, we are fully integrated, we're fully aligned, and we're working very closely together. And the reason we do that is to provide trusted access to project information, as Anita was explaining. And it also links back to what you were discussing about the processes, the data and the technologies, because at the heart of what a company does, it's people, essentially. So you need to have the people with the right skills that are able to collaborate and work together to deliver something greater. So this is where, and we call it, demystifying digital through GeoBIM. And the key in everything is simplicity and a purpose. The tools need to be fit for purpose. And it's also part of a wider journey of multiple stakeholders, right? You do have the digital teams, if we can call them that, even though it's not necessarily the ideal word, right? You have the data savvy teams, you have the operations teams, right? In Skanska, we do have a number of project stakeholders. There's a client, there are our technology partners and vendors, there are information management standardization organizations that do extremely valuable work for what we're delivering. Name drop, Open Geospatial Consortium, Building Smart, BIM GIS standards, they're fundamental to what we're trying to achieve. Collaboration with technology vendors such as, for example, Esri and partnerships such as Esri Autodesk give us the right tools to deliver our work more efficiently, address some of the technical challenges of the integration you mentioned. But once again, at the core is the collaboration, the integration, and having the right processes between the subject matter experts to utilize these tools and data efficiently.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it definitely all comes back to these processes, and for me anyway. Again, I'm talking to the converted here, so there's a lot of things I've normally talked about that I don't have to be said in the conversation with both of you. But just picking up on a slightly different theme. Because I'm thinking here, my original background was in cartography, and then I got into GIS and data management, information management. So I'm thinking often the visualization is and the example you gave, Anita, was about the impact of people being able to literally visualize, the information and infer things. Have you got anything, either any examples or just anything to add about the power of particularly business intelligence and dashboard visualization? I know that's a very specific question. The reason I ask is that something that isn't under the surface. It's implemented by technology, but you can see it. People get dashboards, KPIs. Have you got anything to add, either about examples you've done or the power of how things are so powerful now about being able to produce dashboards? Do you have dashboards? How are they used? Can you say?
Absolutely, we do have. We are utilizing business intelligence in Skanska without a question. What I keep asking myself, when myself or my team or the people we are working with, we're trying to create visual tools, is consider the user experience, right? A dashboard it can be fancy as a snapshot in a PowerPoint presentation if you want to demonstrate complexity, but if you want to demonstrate functionality, applicability, you need to think about how the end user is going to interact and make a decision from this dashboard, whatever this might dashboard be. The way we are working right now is we are integrating GIS information, 3D information that is coming from BIM authoring tools, and dashboard representations and visualizations all in single place. So, for example, just to give you an example, Stephen, of a real-world case study that we're currently deploying on one of our major highways projects in Skanska, is about how we are utilizing all these different visualization tools that we have in place to provide real-time updates regarding construction activities that are happening on site. So what you can instantly do is you can go into your map, right? I'll now simplify it. I will not use the terms GIS BIM. I'm talking about the workflow. You can go into your map. You can see your asset in 3D, your bridge, let's say, in 3D with its wing walls, with piles, abutments, and so on and so forth. you can actually then interrogate through dashboard visualizations, pie charts, and so on and so forth, how many piles have been installed, when these piles were installed, have any non-conformance reports been raised in these piles, where is the documentation of this particular asset located in your project CD, and so on and so forth, right? So by combining graphical and different versions of graphical visualization, GIS, 3D models, dashboard reporting, we provide a really comprehensive visualization twin, if we want to call it, because that's the buzzword these days, right? To the entire project team, and make information very easily accessible to everyone.
Great. Have you got anything to add, Anita?
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, George. So it's then the dashboard was there, the teams were able to help produce it, but then it was the empowerment, my favorite word, of the engineers. So they were then utilizing those dashboards and that information that they trusted to chase their teams. So they said, well, I know that those piles have been built. I can see that on site. Why is that not reflected in the dashboards in reality, visually, and obviously from the data perspective? So it was a great way for them to very transparently say, this needs to be updated. And I think that was really nice to see. It wasn't coming from the BIM or the GIS team about just so you this is what it looks like. They then took ownership of those construction managers and site engineers. And it was quite funny. I caught up with them about a year ago after we'd done this, and they were saying they would use that as a healthy competition between their teams to make sure that all the as-built information was being kept up to date. So I know we joke and we talk about as-builts, but it was great to see that because they trusted it and because they could engage with it and because it was easy to use, they could chase it. And, you know, hopefully this isn't too controversial to say, but if you were to put it into just a BIM model visualization, it wouldn't have had the same impact. So that's where that GIS and BIM integration was really powerful.
Yeah, I think so that's a very good example. I think the ability to then use the same information in many ways, again, I know I'm stating the obvious to us, but that is massively powerful, and I think that's and simplification. You know, a dashboard is by definition trying to simplify things, and there's nothing wrong with that. There is a tendency for some to enjoy the complexity, whereas I guess what part of what we're trying to do collectively is simplify things, which is counterintuitive to some people. But I didn't know if you had anything to add just about the, you mentioned OGC, Open Geospatial Consortium, and again, we're very well versed in these type of standards, but have you got anything to add about how you actually use the standards and how you embedded them? It doesn't have to be them, that's just the example I'm giving. How do you mandate the use of data standards, I guess is what my question is. What's the mechanism of making sure you get what you need? How do you do it? Do you have new standards? How does it work?
That's a really good point, Stephen. And just to fully understand your question, how do we mandate it within our organization, within Skanska, or how do we work with external organizations too?
Yeah, so both. So it could be external data coming in through contractual or partnership arrangements, or within your organization itself. How do you make sure that people are using the standard? I mean, I'm generally interested in standards, really, but I guess the tangible example is how do you mandate sort of a data schema or a data
compliance,
standard?
Right?
Yeah, compliance. How do you monitor it? Yeah, that's right. That's what I'm getting at. Compliance and auditing. Yeah.
And also, both Anita and myself are working in infrastructure sector, and I think we are well aware that lots of standards for the infrastructure sector are currently being deployed and rolled out day by day, right? So we're not at the peak of our maturity. Instead of we are on our journey getting there. So from a GIS perspective, and then I'll hand over to Anita to answer it also from a BIM perspective, we have what we call spatial data infrastructure in Skanska, right? Which I think is a common term within the GIS community, nothing new, nothing fancy really. And the way we typically mandate and utilize standards is through project dedicated GIS execution plans. Now, this comes with its own, we need to take a number of considerations in place, right? We need to take into consideration what the customer exchange information requirements are. and what standards are being mandated to be utilized there. Right? We can think about, from a GIS perspective, about the UK Gemini version 2.3, right? The geospatial metadata standard. Then we are looking to utilize standards, technical standards that are incorporated in GIS software tools such as WMS, WFS, and these type of standards that have been developed by the Geospatial Consortium. We have our Skanska standards in terms of alignment with the BIM team, as I was explaining earlier, which are aligning with the ISO 19650, right? But we also make an effort to bring this over to the GIS world. And this is particularly interesting because, it's quite, I think it's a challenging journey to try and transfer certain protocols and workflows that currently sit under the ISO 19650 and the BIM world within the GIS world, and see how you can implement it within an enterprise database, for example, environment, right? So there are challenges there. And this is how we do it internally. In the meantime, developing automating tools using tools such as ETL processes, right? That's something that's very standard in our industry nowadays. Automation, Python scripts, and so on and so forth. You can validate the accuracy of the received information, but I'll link back to something we were discussing earlier. We need to be in a position to incentivize and properly and be specific on our requirements from our supply chain, and be on this journey with them. Get everyone on board, because there is a lot of information that we receive from our supply chain, and this is where we apply our expertise in order to be able to bring them together on this journey. At the same time, the aspiration is we are working very closely with external organizations around standardization, and what we really wish to achieve is share some of the lessons learned, share some of the use cases we have developed in construction, and request, essentially collaborate, work together, because we need more standards in construction. So that's sort of a high-level approach. Anita, handing over to you as well.
Yeah, very similar from a BIM perspective as well. So if I think historically, internally, we would set our own processes because again, from a personal opinion, it wasn't so well defined in terms of file formats and schemas and definitions by the client or the customer. So it was up to us to take on that jurisdiction and hate to use the scramble around internally to figure out what's going to be the best tool to go from authoring to then coordination of the BIM model if we're going technical, and then how we share that with other processes. So with the GIS team for 4D sequencing, for 5D cost and carbon. That had to come internally, I would say, when I first came into this field. And I really liked the vision that was there with the PAS 1192, absolutely. But there wasn't that level of support at that time. But what I have noticed, and as George alluded to, in the last few years, we've got infrastructure is on the radar, and Building Smart in particular. I'm watching very closely how they're going with their IFC4 development, and it's really interesting to see, because I've seen a knock-on effect now. So changes coming in, project management instructions coming in from clients about, okay, now we need IFC4 as a deliverable. So for me, it's great that they've recognized that this is now the way forward with information exchange externally. Obviously, there's a lot to catch up on with how we get to that point. What's their schema? What do they need? So that's going to be a huge development. And then it's nicely aligned with our internal processes, because then it makes it more efficient. We need to produce IFCs anyway for the client, and they're a fundamental schema for us to be using internally as well. So it's not as if we've got our BIM team and GIS team sitting there for a day doing all these various file conversions, which was a reality a few years ago. So I think that incentivizes it a bit more, that it's needed anyway for the client and for our exchange and that transparency, and we need to do that internally as well. And again, reiterated by 19650, as George said. So from a BIM perspective, Building Smart, and then how the customer tailors it for what they need. And you can see, I've seen anyway, in particular schemas, for example, HS2 incorporating the asset information, life cycle information, all the geometry and the graphical and non-graphical information. So they're not just saying blanket IFC, they're tailoring it to what they need. So it's quite nice to see from the client, but I believe it's also needed to help incentivize downstream through to our teams internally.
Thank you, Anita. You literally answered the next question, which was going to be, how about the link with asset management? Because as you both know, that's sort of more my background, is the post-construction asset management. But you gave the example, so who knows? I'll try to get High Speed 2, so Victor Kainth and Dave White, who's the head of asset management, maybe on another podcast. But yeah, I think that's that throughput. Although we're talking about BIM GIS integration, that final throughput or handoff or handover or into the asset management proper is still an ongoing challenge. I know it's the same thing that we've been talking about, but have you got anything to add on that? Have you seen a more increased maturity of clients now asking? You did give the example of High Speed 2, but are there any other? You don't need to name them, but have you seen a better maturity?
I'll be honest, maybe George is better to answer because of his PhD, but from my perspective, they're asking for it, but there's still not the level of detail of or our understanding of what exactly they need. And I think I get that it needs to be developed, but it's also, there's a huge opportunity as we go through design to just incorporate that information. That's probably I don't know, if we talk about percentages, what percentage of information design can actually be used for the asset information management handover? I think it's significant. So I do believe there's still an opportunity. We've definitely improved our design and BIM coordination processes to factor in asset information management, which was a huge step change. And I can say that the BIM team on that project were fantastic with that foresight. And it was actually George, I'm trying not to big you up too much, but it was you who led it, having that insight and that vision. So yeah, I'd say there's more awareness, and you can see the connection between the handover, the asset information management team, and the BIM and the digital engineering team. But what I haven't quite seen yet personally is that level of detail of what that actually means and what you need for us to then start our processes internally. Yeah. I don't know, George, maybe you can answer that.
Have you got anything to add, George, particularly maybe how they're turning the more traditional asset management templates, traditionally there'd have been spreadsheets, into, you seeing that becoming a deliverable, that becoming a deliverable in a model, for example?
Definitely, Stephen, in any sort of graphical data, whether it is in a GIS model, if we want to use a Word or a 3D model, we see our clients evolving, and providing templates and standardized information of what they need. There is the question that Anita was discussing earlier on, spot on, which is this exactly what you need? How are you using this information? Is there something else that most likely we are producing during the construction process that would be useful for you to reduce your operational costs, but it's not being handed over, or has the opportunity to be digitized? If we think about the health and safety file, right, to bring up an example, Stephen, if the health and safety file is a part of the PDF, a bunch of PDF documents all stored somewhere on a SharePoint after the handover, how are the operational teams ever going to unlock the power of getting, just to give you the health and safety CDM risks into the real world asset during their operation maintenance process, right? This is where you see convergence of GIS and BIM world actually makes this a reality, makes utilization of digital for asset management. But once again, it depends on data quality and standards. But we are on this journey. It's a pretty exciting journey, has its challenges, but I'm a keen believer that it will become a reality in the next few years.
Yeah, and I think you're right, and I think you both said that as well. We're on a journey. I think we're in the middle of it, and you're more involved than I am, sort of hands-on and strategically leading it. But I think accepting that, I often talk to people who think something is a done deal or that things should be happening already. And I think that just accepting that it is a journey, different sectors are in a different place, different domains are in a different place, different organizations are in a different place. And to some degree, that'll probably always be the case, won't it? Like, you know, different clients, what I mean, they're always going to have a slightly different requirement and a different level of maturity. Anyway, I'll stop talking because it's not about me, but I yeah, it's very good to talk to you both because you're actually implementing it. Just if I could ask, and I should have mentioned it already, but just to throw it in there because you were talking about IFC and obviously our link to Building Smart International, for example, in the UK and Ireland chapter, but CoBI, I'll just say it. What do clients? What do you think about CoBI? Do clients ask for it? Yeah, just a short answer. Yeah, just,
no.
Yeah.
But the caveat with that is infrastructure-led projects are not looking for CoBI in terms of their information exchange. But in the building sector, I do know that department still do produce CoBI information. But I've not seen to date from an exchange information requirement any CoBI requirements. Sorry to say.
Yeah, and again, just for the benefit of people watching or listening, that is or should be a preferred, one of the preferred methods of handover for the central UK government if they're the client. But anyway, UK BIM framework, I'll link to that in the bottom. But I just maybe just changing gears slightly. Are there any examples of emergent technology that you have seen or that you're using? So, for example, robotic survey or whatever it is that you think people might be interested to know about, and maybe we can link to it. So for example, the innovative use of drones. Again, innovative is subjective because it might be things we've seen before, but are there any examples of the deployment of technology you think people might be interested to see that you can give an example of?
I think you need to have a special session with Mark Lawton on this one.
Okay.
Yeah, but
yeah, just a few. Say, oh yeah, we're using self-driving vehicles here. Or I know that slightly changed the topic, but I'm just thinking an external example is great.
No, so definitely using drones on the projects that I work on. And what's been really nice to see is integrating that into the GeoBIM environment. So George can talk more about that. But drone capture becoming business as usual, but for various different requirements, from an as-built survey point of view, from a construction progress point of view, and also the fact that we're investing in our own pilots in-house as well and having more regular flyovers. I believe it is very valuable for long infrastructure projects. That goes without saying, it's quite obvious, but I think when I started getting involved with the integration of the survey, so the meshes, like getting technical with the BIM models, it was just great to see from a commercial perspective. I was showing it to the QSs and they said, well, that's great. Then we know that we can play our subbies because they've done what they said they were going to do. But also from that construction progress and looking at potential AI solutions, we're then seeing how much of the program has been completed. So that's stuff that we're definitely getting more involved in. I know that George has done a huge test case, on a highways project as well.
Thank you. Can you talk about that, George, or is that?
Yeah, certainly, Stephen. So firstly, I would like to reiterate Anita's first comment. 3D machine control, obviously drone, telemetry, autonomous vehicle. That one of the best people in the country to talk about is Mark Lawton. We're working very closely together. Again, is the triangle of engineering, surveying, GIS, geospatial, if you want, and the building information modeling world, because 3D machine control needs input from these data sources. GIS needs input from the other two data sources. We cannot be disconnected. We need to work together. So definitely something we're looking at. Anita mentioned the utilizing artificial intelligence within a geospatial context, and something that we are doing now is utilizing the drone imagery that we are capturing, linking back, to why we're doing everything we are doing, right? By utilizing the drone imagery that we're capturing, we're able to develop AI algorithms that allow us to detect change on a much more frequent basis, like of what work has happened on site in this particular day. This helps us keep our productivity on track, right? And this is a great example of geospatial data coming together using emerging technologies or emerged technologies such as AI, better, to improve our operational efficiency.
Great, thank you. I know we've mentioned digital twin by name. Again, perhaps the typical audience I have in mind might not even know what they are or nor work with them. But I think certainly what we've been talking about is this feedback loop. You know, the process not being a closed process like in the old days with survey, maybe a bit of GIS or something, and then maybe modeling, and then that's the end of it. So have you got anything to say about not necessarily explaining what digital twins are, but just have you seen a benefit in using that terminology? Do you use that terminology, and do you think it's something new or just a new badge for some things that we're doing already? That's George.
Yeah.
I'll leave that to you first. I mean, every opinion's right, but what do you think? First of all, do you use that language with clients? I'm just interested on the terminology.
We do avoid it when we can, or try to explain what it means, because it's not clear what it means. And I almost sound like a broken record. Everyone has a different perception of digital twins, which makes it challenging to use it consistently and people getting the same level of understanding when you describe things. I do not believe it's a new term, not at all. And most likely in the next few years it's going to change. We're already hearing about digital rehearsals, or whatever the next digital triplet or whatever is going to be. But at the baseline, the philosophy of a digital twin, if we were to demystify that again, right, is the connection of the digital element with a physical asset. And there will be a point in time where the asset managers, at my observation, or what I really believe will be far more interested in the digital asset and the digital representation of the world rather than the physical, because they will be able to utilize all the emerging technologies and underlying data to manage the physical asset in a far more efficient way. So I would say this, one of the things I really like about digital twins, if we can use this word, is the life cycle digital twins aspect that I think is extremely important. And Anita was highlighting earlier that it is the digital thread, if you want to use, or the connection across the entire project life cycle. The digital twins, it's more than one, should not live in isolation. There are different twins for different disciplines, for different projects at the same life cycle, that need to be able to interact with each other as you progress through project delivery. And setting the right data, the right processes, the right technology tools, Stephen, is key for that.
Great, thank you. Thanks. Have you got anything to add, Anita? Just do you talk about it with client digital twins and or not?
Yeah, again, we try not to, just to avoid the confusion. Yeah, again, so I think CDBV have done an amazing piece of work with setting out that vision, but similar to BIM and the terminology behind that, I think there's just been a bit of a misconception about. So I think I'm seeing less as well from a client perspective about that terminology, I must admit. So it's more about digital engineering, and then breaking it down actually to the asset aspect and the construction aspect. I think the whole thing, yes, is digital twin, but when you're trying to start to sell it to your leadership, to your colleagues in different functions, I think it can be quite dangerous. But I think from our from a GIS, BIM, ES professional, yes, we understand and we know what the goal is, but I think we have to almost do a translate to the wider team in construction. Specifically, I can't speak for other industries, about simplifying what that means, and to then allow them to get on board and be a contributor towards that, because at the end of the day, we need the information from them to feed into this digital twin.
Great, thank you. So I will ask directly, although we've already mentioned GeoBIM. So GeoBIM, which we'll probably elaborate on, because obviously you're involved in the ArcGIS GeoBIM solution, but as a concept, do you use GeoBIM as a term? Again, it might seem I'm fascinated with the words, but it, like we're just saying, it can make a difference. Do you use the word GeoBIM?
You see me smiling, Stephen, even when you just mentioned the word. So no, thank you for the question. The answer is yes, and I really like what the way you phrase the question, because we have the technical solution, but GeoBIM is bigger than a technical solution. It is the concept, it is the convergence of the geospatial with the building information modeling world. I don't want to sound again like a broken record, but it's heavily reliant on the integration of processes and data. Technology and great tools such as ArcGIS GeoBIM, help us bring this to life, but we need to have the background, the back end, if you'd like, sorted out first. So yes, GeoBIM is a term we are utilizing, constantly evolving this the concept into technical solutions and applying it on during project delivery, pre-construction, as Anita was mentioning. And one of the things we're really looking forward to is the asset handover as well, right? The handover of asset information. I can believe that GeoBIM has a huge role to play in that. And I remember when I was listening to your other podcast with Mark Goldman, from Esring, that you were discussing this, and the big shout out as well to Mark for his great remarks to Anita and myself. We've had the pleasure of working together for about 4 years now, and he's a fantastic industry expert and a very good friend. So it was very nice to hear your thoughts on the integration of these two worlds for digital asset handover. And yes, this is a term we are using, and we see that. Well, we're keen believers that this is a term that will only grow in the industry going forward.
Great, thank you. Have you got anything to add on that? I mean, I know you gave your response, Anita, on digital twin, but GeoBIM, I guess you do say it because George has said that.
Yeah, just briefly, without sounding too cheesy, I think GeoBIM has helped with the change management or the cultural change for BIM, and it's leveraged what the meaning of BIM means to people in construction. I think it was quite a challenge in the past to explain what BIM was, but I truly believe, maybe I'm brainwashed, but I don't think I am, in that GeoBIM did leverage the meaning of BIM as well.
And if I can add on very quickly, Stephen, on what just Anita said, GeoBIM is a multidisciplinary effort, right? There are lots of people that are working tirelessly to bring something like this into life, and a huge shout out to the Skanska GIS team that I have the pleasure of working with, of course, and the wider, engineering, surveying, BIM teams, technical team within our Skanska environment. It is, as I mentioned, the integration and the convergence is heavily reliant on the collaboration of lots of different stakeholders, right? So on this journey, we are not alone. It's not just GIS and BIM, but if you think about what geospatial and building information modeling describe, it's almost 90%, if not more, of the built environment. But it does not necessarily mean it's only for the geospatial or the BIM experts. It's for everyone that is involved in the built environment. So that was just my thought.
Sorry, George, I completely agree with you. I think it's visualizing that horizontal rather than the verticals. And I know you do this because you're involved, but again, for the benefit of people listening or watching, it's not there are disciplines, but by definition, there have to be a cross-disciplinary. Yeah. So obviously I'm just paraphrasing what you just said, but I think, there probably wasn't that word. I think SDI, as you mentioned, partly picked things up, but probably not some of the more emergent BIM, the governance terminologies, for example, linked to ISO 19650 series. So I think it's useful. And anyway, it's not about my opinion, but I realise I've probably not got too much time left with you. So I know we started a bit late, but I would be interested to know what you think where you think people could go to get more information. So it could be thought leadership, it could be examples.
Obviously, I come to the BIMTube podcast as a starting point. I thought I'd do a plug there. No, genuinely, that was a really nice. You've got some really nice speakers around BIM and GIS and the visions. I think also I'm personally following Building Smart a lot recently because of my role now and where I am with what we need. And I keep saying to George, I still feel like I'm not there with IFCs and Building Smart, and I still don't quite. So that's always, but that's the personal interest. Go to as many webinars as you can. Again, a shout out to CICS. They do some really nice webinars. So they appreciate that you can't be physically there. So they do some nice knowledge sharing. That's quite high level. That's less technical. Get on to their free emailing list. Conferences, I would say DCW and GeoBusiness has always been a good place to start and have your journey. And then I think we've got a lot of speakers this year as well from our company, and it's quite interesting to see it's from various different parts of the business. So they're getting more involved. We've got the asset information management side, we've got the environmental side, I think, and also George and Scott, head of BIM and head of GIS, are doing a joint talk. And it's not about technical. It's not. I don't believe there's going to be any technical coverage in that. Yeah, it's quite hard to think on the spot, but.
If you think of something, so thank you. I mean, that's more than enough. Thank you. I'll link to them. If you think of anything afterwards, again, it's just a way find people to, to just to have an overview. Certainly, the event Digital Construction Week that you mentioned in GeoBusiness, certainly, as you've just reflected, some of the speakers there is a good way in to see what companies.
Yeah, the other one, I must admit, when I first joined the industry, B1M, and the videos that they produce, fantastic. Great coverage, and just simplify. Again, the theme here I feel is simplify it. They really simplified the message, and they keep it up to date and maintain it. I think that's what's really useful. I'm a very visual person as well, so I take that in better than reading through the standards. So it's always good to have someone talk it through. So yeah.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Anita. And George, where would you recommend people go to get more information about these topics?
I think in the end, it's what Anita said about, so not only delivering this content, but it's also how you're delivering this content. And again, shout out for the initiative around podcasts, Stephen, because it is an extremely friendly way to help to raise the awareness, right? And it definitely needs to happen by professionals and people that have experience in the industry. It's not just theory, and they are able to apply, like theory into real world examples, because it makes the message more relatable. So podcasts, blogs from recognized people, within the AEC space, GIS, BIM, digital space. I think that's an extremely useful, 3-5 minute read, gives you an indication, helps you, triggers your imagination. If you're interested about something, you can focus on it. Conferences, chartership organizations, CICS, RICS, this was also by Anita. I would also like to throw into the mix here the collaboration that ideally we would like to see, or we want to see more collaboration between the industry and academia. And I'm not wearing my PhD hat on right now. I'm talking about applicable research in construction and transferring, the great work that is happening in the academic world back into the industry. And at the same time, industry sharing lessons learned on what the real challenges are back to the academic world. So we need to have this closer collaboration, which happens through university events, can happen through university networking opportunities, or simply doing joint presentations and collaboration workshops with experts from both worlds.
Great, thank you both. And I've literally just got a couple of minutes left with you, but just briefly, if you could just say, Anita, if I start with you, what you think the single, and this would be hard to just do one, but the single biggest challenge that we need to overcome as soon as possible to improve I think I have an idea what you might say, but anyway, what's what the single area that we need to focus on if we had a finite budget to improve GeoBIM, if we're going to call it that? Where do you think we should focus?
Oh no.
Or George, if you want to have a think, Anita. Either of you.
If we had unlimited money, so the question
is, a project.
Money,
if it was a discrete project, if I said here's a finite budget, we can only focus on one facet. Well, it'll be a challenge how we describe that. But anyway, one aspect of improving the GeoBIM flow. What would you tackle first? So I won't say anymore because that'd be putting words in your mouth. But yeah,
I would like to educate the guests, and Anita, feel free to correct me, but I think with digital and therefore GeoBIM, the first step is making people to trust whatever tool is going to give in front of them, and you do that by empowering them. How do you empower them? You empower them with continuous training and upskilling. Digital is not just mine or Anita's responsibility or our team's, right? It's a responsibility for everyone. So if I were to invest somewhere this money, it would be to raise the awareness of what can be done, what could be done, and what should we be doing.
Great. Thanks, George. Anita, do you agree? You can just simply agree or add to that.
Yeah, I do agree. I think it's a really tough question because the whole point of GeoBIM is about the complete life cycle, and that's what needs to be focused on, getting all of those stakeholders across that life cycle to really feed in all the information that's required, which will then allow our users, our lovely users, to trust the information that's in there. For them to trust, there needs to be information that's fit for purpose, and for it to be fit for purpose, it needs to come from the people who are owning or requiring the use across the life cycle. So I don't think it really answers your question, but I think it's if we would simplify it, it's the function owners and stakeholders to really invest in inputting, upskilling, training, and maintaining.
Owning it eventually, so making it part of their work, right? Or the day-to-day decision making, business as usual, let's say, regardless of organization or stage of the project lifecycle.
Without it being extra effort, this is part of their day job.
Thank you. I mean, I didn't know what the answer would be either. So that's, and I think you're right, Anita. It is almost an impossible question to ask. That's why I asked it, because it is multi-faceted. But I think I would, again, it wasn't a trick question in that way. I think I'd absolutely agree with your sentiments, which is about stakeholder engagement, comms, upskilling. We've sort of gone full circle, and that wasn't necessarily intentional around the people aspect. And I think, you know, as long as people take that sort of message away, and I didn't contrive the question to make it so, but it just happens that that's where a lot of people don't focus on stakeholder engagement, comms, upskilling, awareness initially. You know, they focus on the nuts and bolts or the technology side. And as you said, Anita, it's impossible to answer because it's multifaceted, but surely that's where people should start. But so I agree with you. So I've got nothing around other than to agree with you. I've had my time with you. I could definitely talk all day, as you probably know already. But what I will do is obviously put the links, as I've said, in the description. If if you think of anything else, then obviously let me know and I'll add it. But I've certainly made a note of, for example, CICES, which you may know. I also had the president of CICES, Andy Evans, on another podcast. There's a nice shout out there. We're starting to get cross references now on the podcast. This is getting good. So it looks like we need Mark Lawton on one soon. He has been approached, but he's a busy man, so we'll try to get him soon. But I will thank you both. I could keep going, but thank you so much for your time and your insights, and I appreciate you both making the time collectively to talk to me. So thanks, Anita Soni and George Floros, for your time and your insights. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Stephen, for the effort that you put in. I know this is out of your own time, so this is really valuable information that you're putting out there. So thank you for inviting us, but also thank you for doing what you do. It's really valued.
Likewise, It was a great pleasure, Stephen. Thank you very much for the invite. and the work you're doing is simply invaluable for the industry and pushing forward what we all wish to achieve. So yeah, thank you for the invite, and it was a great pleasure being with you.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you.
Just a reminder that you can access all the podcasts in video and audio if you visit bim.tube. So our website again is at bim.tube.